And now two guys who survived a zombie attack, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 40 of In the Rabbit Holes Urban Survival Podcast. In today's episode, we prepare to travel. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan,
and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today's show is sponsored by Katz Coffee. If you're looking for truly exceptional coffee to help you survive the morning or the next zombie apocalypse, you need to be drinking Katz. They specialize in the finest coffee from sources that prioritize environmental responsibility and are fair trade certified. Their goal is to achieve perfection in every cup. Check them out at Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com, or click on their bright green banner on the site and make sure you're dealing with an official sponsor of the show. Again, that's Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com. Okay, so Halloween is just around the corner, and a quick reminder to take the necessary precautions for keeping your kids safe. Don't let them eat razor blade filled candy and such like that, and make sure that they do get to eat all the candy they want, and that is Jonathan and Aaron approved. You can blame them bouncing off the walls on us.
Yep. All the candy they want. No
Yep.
razor blades.
No razor blades. And with yet another October passing us by, we're quickly coming up on the holiday season, and that means traveling for a lot of you. But as Tech Boss brought up on the forum, remember, join the forum. You two get to engage in conversations with other like-minded preppers. But how do you travel prepared? And that's kind of what we're going to go into today. So to start with, I think some of the most basic things when it comes to traveling prepared are knowing the city you're going to. And the best way to start with that is having a city and state map with you long before you board the plane, train, automobile to go wherever it is you're going. Anything can happen when you get to that city, and knowing where you're going within that city, GPS can break, all these things. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time, that electronics are great, but there is always the chance that they will break. So have those maps with you. Even if you're traveling to a foreign country or something, you should have maps of the city and area that you're going to be in. Another thing that you should consider is a list of hospitals, and either knowing where those hospitals are, printing out Google Maps of where those hospitals are, or marking them on the maps that you take with you of where those hospitals are. You have to be kind of careful when you're Googling emergency medical places, because sometimes you get these small, weird little clinics that aren't necessarily 24 hours. So really make sure you're taking a close look at whatever emergency medical place that you're marking down.
Yeah. Most of the time, the State Department can provide you with lists of hospitals in the area.
If you're traveling abroad.
If you're traveling abroad, that's right. And the nice part about the abroad stuff when you are traveling is most of the time, if you call the local embassy or consulate, when you talk to them, just ask explicitly of who the local staff goes to, and they are usually more than happy to share that information. And that makes it a little bit better. I mean, if you need to go find a dentist because you have a major infection, which is actually something that happened to my father while we were overseas. Actually, his infection was bad enough that had he not gone to a really good dentist, the infection could have killed him. So finding a good doctor is critical, and the ambassador and his staff probably go to the best doctors in the area.
Let's talk about gear for a second, but before we actually go into a basic list of items outside of the maps that you should take with you, first a couple of stories and kind of quick warnings and a tip. The first thing is you should clear out any bags that you're going to be taking on an airplane completely. really check the pockets and stuff. John and I each have a story to share, and they're actually somewhat similar in how, I guess we could just flat out call TSA completely inept. Jennifer, my girlfriend, was going to Vegas, or I think it was California, actually, with her girlfriends, and I had given her an Izula ESEE neck knife a while back. How it wound up in her carry-on bag, I have no idea. But she managed to go to and from California with a, about a 3-inch blade neck knife, fixed blade neck knife in her bag. Make sure you check your bags really carefully. And I know, Jonathan, you've got a story to tell too.
Yeah, I've actually got 2 quick ones. Always check not just your bag, but the pockets to your slacks and your pants. I was just walking through this past week. I went to Birmingham, Alabama, where I actually did get to meet Jeep. So hello, Jeep. How you doing? I had a small Spyderco in my change pocket on my jeans. And as I was about to go through the line, I thought to myself, all right, I can either lose this knife completely, throw it in the trash, or I can just see what happens if I throw it in my suitcase, which was a carry-on. Threw it in my suitcase towards the bottom where the wheels are and made it through, no problem, and I even made it back, no problem. But just make sure you check everything. I would have preferred not to have ever been in that situation. And Karen, my wife, didn't check her purse before we flew to Spain last year. She actually ended up bringing a Kimber pepper spray onto the plane, and for those of you that know about it, it's a pepper spray that uses 2 small explosive charges to propel the pepper spray. So, yes, she brought that into Spain, and while we were in Spain, we decided not to try to get it back into the U.S., so we threw that one away. That was an expensive loss. So always just check your bags, and not just your bags, your pockets, your bags, everything. Empty it all out. It just doesn't take that much time.
And to move on to another tip about making sure that you keep items out of your carry-on, take a separate bag with you. They make those gallon Ziploc bags. Anything will really work. Make sure that you take any kind of survival items, whether it be knives, fires, any stuff. Make sure that you take that and put it in your separate bag first before you do any packing, and then take that bag and put it in the bag that you're going to check at the airport. That way you make absolutely sure that any kind of prohibited items are where they need to be and not in your slacks pockets or not in a bag you're going to carry on or anything like that. Another thing is take some small zip ties with you, and you can put them through the holes of your zipper, the zipper pulls, when you get through the airport and when you get to the hotel and everything. And what that does is it lets you know if anybody's been tampering with your bags. Now, when you're going to the airport, make sure you've got locks, TSA-approved locks, on all of the zippers to your bag. It only takes a split second for somebody to slip something in their bag, and there's 1,000,001 horror stories of stuff like that happening where somebody gets to a foreign country or another state or anything, and somebody slipped something in their bag, meaning with the intent that they were going to get it back from you on the other side.
Just remember, none of what we're telling you about stops TSA from going into your bags. There is a good potential that they will open your bags and take a look in there. None of what we're providing here is a way to stop them. There is no way to stop them. They will open that bag if they want to. So don't worry too much about that. It's just, that's something you have to deal with. It is what it is.
Moving on to a quick list of gear. And I know one of the things that Tech Boss brought up on the forum was a concern about, well, what if you're going somewhere and it's an area that's prone to hurricanes? Well, this can be any kind of natural disaster. You could be going to California where they're prone to earthquakes and maybe you're not used to dealing with earthquakes, or you could be going somewhere in the Caribbean or someplace like that does deal with hurricanes. And hurricanes do happen occasionally before and after the official hurricane season. So don't just say, oh, well, we're outside of hurricane season, I'm not going to worry about it. And as people in California can certainly attest, and unfortunately people in Turkey, as of a couple of days ago, can attest, earthquakes have no season. Be aware of the natural disaster potentials that can affect the area that you're going to. And some of the stuff we're going to mention today is kind of universal, no matter what the situation is you're going to. And so that can start off with the dehydrated rations, which we've talked about before. There's a couple of different brands on there, which we'll put in the show notes. And most of them have 72-hour versions, and that's going to get you through most instances. I mean, if you're going beyond 72 hours in a disaster away from your home or something, you're really getting into some hairy situations. But those rations can kind of get you through at least the first 72 hours and hopefully get you out of harm's way or get you through the issue. Other things to consider are fire steels are prohibited, and so are magnesium blocks. So if you're going to have that in your carry-on, you need to be aware that I've slipped through TSA many a times with a fire steel or magnesium block in my pocket and never had a problem, but you're not supposed to do it, and I am not necessarily endorsing you do it.
Right. If it just happens to be on your keychain, it's most likely nobody's going to notice it there. And most of these things are cheap enough that if they notice it, you can be like, "Oh, I totally forgot that was on my keychain." Pop it off and let them do whatever they were going to do with it. Just again, it's one of those things where you may want to change the way things are, and that's fine. Work through your political system, go out there, do what you need to do that way. But when you're at the airport, be mindful of the fact that the TSA agents are just trying to do their job the best they can.
When you land in an area, pick up a disposable lighter. They're $1. And when you leave, you can always throw it away. The same thing goes with matches, stuff like that. It is, we've talked about several times how important it is and how many different situations can require fire, some form of fire making. So, it doesn't take more than a couple of seconds to stop in someplace and grab one. An unusual item, which we've talked about before, is the water bob. And essentially, it's a giant water bladder that you put in the bathtub and you fill up. And what made me think of that really was Tech Boss's question about hurricanes. However, no matter if you're in an earthquake or anything like that where there's a disruption and you're in a hotel, I don't think I've ever stayed in a hotel in the U.S. that does not have a bathtub. So you can, if you've got a situation where you're hunkering down in a hotel room, at least as you see the situation coming up, you can fill it up with water.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought of that one before, so that's a pretty good idea. And they collapse pretty small.
Yeah, they do collapse down very small. With earthquakes, that's going to be more problematic as you don't really get any warning. But
and you're not going to want to be in a tall building post-earthquake. So keep that in mind. If there is an earthquake, you're going to want to stay put during the earthquake. But once it's over, you're probably going to want to leave taller buildings and things like that for a period of time, especially if it caused structural damage enough to interfere with water flow. Because if there's structural damage to the building, you don't want to be on the 8th floor.
Exactly. Another thing to consider is a collapsible water bag. And these are, they usually carry about 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons, and they're like the water bob, but much smaller, and they have a little on-off spout on them. They're usually about $4 or $5 at a sporting goods store, and they also, since they're just a big bag, they crunch down very small. And that's something where, with the water bob, you wouldn't necessarily want to put it in the bathtub and keep it in there the whole time while you're in a hotel, because, well, one, you're tying up the bathtub and shower, and now you have no way to shower, and two, housekeeping might think something's really squirrely with what you do. But with the small collapsible water bag, you can at least, as soon as you get to your hotel room and get unpacked, you can fill up about 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons, and that'll get you through most issues that you're going to come up against. Let's see. Important numbers written down. We've talked about this a couple times too, of just, they make those right in the rain small notepads like you see a lot of journalists using, and they're waterproof and everything else. Write down important telephone numbers and mark next to those telephone numbers who that person is, so that even if you're unconscious, an emergency worker can take that out and they have some frame of reference of who they might be able to call to figure out A, who you are, and B, if you have any kind of medical issues they know about.
While you're writing important numbers down, the other thing to remember is notify other people of how to get in contact with you as well. This goes back to that whole peace of mind thing. Make sure that your loved ones know where you are. And if something does happen, try to communicate with them, again, via text message. We've had a lot of these discussions in the past, but use the technology at hand to attempt to communicate. A lot of times phone calls won't work, but again, text messages will usually eventually get through. If you can get an internet connection, even better.
Yeah. Another thing that people don't often think of is a signal mirror. Signal mirrors are very inexpensive, and you can pick up some pretty decent ones that even come with little cases. TSA will not even look at them twice. They're not prohibited. You can take them on an airplane. The same thing goes with the emergency blankets and those tiny little emergency bags. They may kind of look at you funny, but they're not prohibited in any way. I traveled to and from Mexico with all kinds of stuff like that in my bag, and the only thing anybody ever kind of did a double take at was I have plastic holders that I keep batteries in, and when I was going into Mexico, the Mexican authorities actually did pull those out of the bag and looked at them, and then as soon as they realized they were batteries and not bullets, which is what I'm assuming they thought they were, they put them back in the bag and sent me on my merry way. Signal mirrors are great. They are, if you are in a real disaster, they are a last-ditch effort way of signaling for help to rescue helicopters and stuff like that. A flashlight, and I want to make this point because I think a lot of people forget it, is carry extra batteries with you for any important devices that you take with you. Don't just rely on the batteries that you have because, anything can happen. Take extra batteries. But take a small, even if it's just a small light, it doesn't have to be a tactical light. It can be a pretty inexpensive light. We've talked before about those, the mini mag lights. They're like $15. And AA batteries are pretty plentiful and pretty inexpensive as well. Travel hideaway belts, bras, and ankle wallets. And I got through talking about hideaway bras without laughing. But and we're going to have links in the show notes today, but there's all kinds of very interesting stuff that is made for travelers where you can hide passports, you can hide money, identification, credit cards, all kinds of stuff like that on your person. The belts are pretty interesting. They actually, from the inside, you can zip down the middle and you can tuck bills inside of them. They have what essentially look like ankle holsters that will fit something as large as a passport in them. The bras, I guess that really depends on the size of cleavage of how big that, I don't know, ladies. I linked to it, but you can go take a look at exactly what that does.
On that, you'll have to do your own research. We do recommend posting any information you find on the forum.
Moving off gear and moving more onto, well, no, actually it is still gear, but talking about knives and guns. Now these require close attention when you're traveling. Different areas have very different laws about knives and about guns. But starting off with knives, and this was something that Jonathan and I ran into a few years back, and in Houston, having a folding and locking blade knife, there's no problem with it. It's no big deal.
Normal stuff. I mean,
it's perfectly normal.
Almost every knife you see.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what we found out is in San Antonio, another part of Texas, just south of Austin, for those of you who don't know, it is actually illegal to have a locking blade. Any blade that or a fixed blade. So you can't carry a fixed blade or any kind of a locking blade. That includes liner locks, the traditional rear lock, really any locking blade. So you can just have a standard slip joint knife. And that limits what you can carry significantly.
Yes, and the length of knives changes from city to city. Even within a state can have its own laws about the size of a knife, but then the cities can have their own separate laws about those knives that may be more restrictive. And you also have to be aware of how they measure it, which I did an interview recently, and I was speaking with a custom knife maker, and we were talking about that, just how many different ways these different city and state governments come up with to measure how big a blade is on a knife. So make sure you understand how they're actually measuring it. Because some places, they don't just measure the cutting edge, which is kind of silly. But then again, the whole idea of the length of a knife being what prohibits it is kind of silly in and itself. But you also need to know whether or not what the laws are around concealing a knife, and even putting it in your pocket can be considered concealing it. So these are all things that you need to really understand. Google them, search them out.
And I just want to throw out there, even though that I was forced into the situation that I was recently about throwing a knife into a carry-on suitcase, I think we would both, Aaron and I, probably agree on this one. We highly recommend that if you are going to bring a knife with you, check the bag that the knife is in. Just follow the rules. A lot of you have nice knives that you'd like to carry with you when you travel. If you'd like to keep that knife and guarantee the keeping of that knife, check it in a checked bag.
Exactly. Very similar to checking knife laws are gun laws. Now, gun laws in the United States, at least, that becomes a little more complicated because you have issues where you may have your concealed handgun license, but you have to make sure that your state has reciprocity to the state that you're going to. And I know, you were telling me in Colorado there are areas where even though you can have your concealed handgun license in the state, there's cities that then block it. So even within your own state, you have to check.
So just an example, if you are going to travel to Colorado and you think, oh, well, Colorado's got reciprocity with my state, and I'm going to go hunting there, so I'm also going to bring my hunting rifle. Be very careful when you're driving through Denver, for instance. I think Denver still has this rule. They did a few years ago. You actually, on a bolt-action rifle, while driving through Denver, the bolt is supposed to be removed from the action. Their rules get that strict. And, that's just the city of Denver. The rest of Colorado is pretty permissive. So within a lot of states, just like with knives, it becomes city to city within Texas. Within a lot of states, it can become city to city for guns. So be very detail-oriented when you check these rules. Check the state and check the locality. It might even be helpful to call up the local sheriff's office in the area you're going to be traveling to. So whatever local county police and even potentially the local city police, and just ask. They're probably more than happy to help you with the question.
Yeah, I did that a number of years ago. I was traveling to Phoenix to visit with a childhood friend. And at the time, concealed handgun licenses were still pretty new and reciprocities hadn't really been set up yet. So I called ahead to New Mexico and I called ahead to Arizona, the DPS offices there, and chatted with them. And you really would be surprised at how, that's the people answering the phones. That's their jobs is to answer your questions about stuff like that. And most law enforcement would much rather, if not all, would much rather answer your question and help you stay out of trouble than have you get to their state and get into trouble. They don't want that. They'd much rather be chasing real bad guys.
Oh, yeah. And the laws get so complicated. It's not just where you can carry and what you can carry. It starts becoming, what's the legal magazine capacity where I'm going? So if you go to the state of New Jersey, for instance, well, most likely there's no reciprocity there. So, don't worry too much about it. But, there it's 10 rounds versus in Texas, there's no limitation on the rounds in my handgun. Ammunition types. Some states may have rules against certain types of bullets. They've defined hollow points as being extra dangerous versus ball ammo, which seems completely ridiculous unless you want to shoot the guy behind the guy you're shooting. But hey, whatever. But calling ahead, getting information, here in Texas we have DPS. In other states, they've got state troopers or sheriffs, again, local police.
Highway
Feel free
Patrol.
to call. Pardon? Oh, yeah, Highway Patrol. But all those agencies are usually more than happy to help you. And if you're going to be traveling by air, which we'll get into, call the TSA.
Yeah.
They know the rules better than anyone else does.
At least the people hopefully answering the phones do.
Yeah, you can keep your fingers crossed. And yes, you can fly with a handgun. You just have to check it in a TSA certified, TSA certified lockbox, Aaron? There's a few different types out there.
Yeah, there's the box itself. Certification just means that it needs to be a hard case. So like one of the Pelican cases or a Firebox or any of those things, as long as you can put a lock through it. Now, It does have to be a lock, to the best of my knowledge, but it does have to be a lock that opens with a key. And you basically, you walk in, not with the gun out in the open, locked in the box. You go to the counter when you're checking in, and you inform the check-in agent that you are checking a firearm. They will not freak out. They will not look at you funny. It's just going to be, oh, okay, no problem. And they're going to start pulling out paperwork. And they're going to ask you to open the case, and they're going to ask you to show them the firearm. And what they're looking for is to make sure that you have stored the firearm appropriate, which we'll have links to all these details in the show notes. But they want to see that you've stored it appropriately, which is essentially without ammo in it.
Yeah, or in the box.
Or what? No, actually, you can have it in the box. It just has to be in its own box. And there is something else about, you're not supposed to keep it in a magazine or clip, but there are special conditions, which I got to tell you, I read it twice, and it was still confusing about what conditions. But just take it out, put it in the ammo box that the ammo came in, or a similar box, and they list cardboard, metal, wood, can be anything that is suited for storing ammunition. I didn't see anything that actually listed a specific amount of ammo that you were allowed to fly with, so I really can't answer the question about how much can you go with.
Yeah, and on that ammo note, just check with your carrier, because I know some again, this goes back to rules become different. So the TSA has a minimum requirements. The airlines can add additional requirements to that. So check with your airline, because some of them do not actually, and I'm just looking at one of the websites right now, I'm not even going to name the airline, but they do require the ammunition actually be stored in a separate box from the gun. And when I say separate box, I mean separate containers. So just check with the airline before you go off and do any of this. Airline, TSA, all good sources of information.
Yes. So, like I said, don't worry about it. When you get there, it's nothing to be nervous about. They're used to dealing with it. There may be a little fumbling while they look for whichever managing TSA agent that has to sign off on it and say, yes, okay, this is okay, everything looks in order.
So give yourself plenty of time. So
yeah.
if you normally check in an hour before, give yourself an extra hour. I mean, and I say that a little flippantly, it probably isn't an extra hour, but just make sure you've given yourself enough extra time that all of the stuff that needs to get done can get done without you having to rush and be hurried about it. Just like Aaron said, this isn't the first time they're going to be doing this, especially actually like right now, for instance, it's hunting season. So if you take a lot of flights out into the Midwest, you'll see a lot of people checking long guns. So it isn't an unusual thing. It happens all the time. They're ready for it. It's just an issue of checking with the airline, and actually the airline should be able to tell you how much extra time to give yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Since we've talked about guns and knives and other exciting toys, so when you get to a city, what's the best way to figure out what areas should you stay out of? And I'm going to tell you this now. Taxi drivers are like the best information centers in a city, because the taxi drivers know where they will not pick up and drop off from. They're usually pretty explicit about it. So those are actually the best guys and ladies to ask as soon as you land. If you're taking a tram or a bus or something, you can ask them too. Most locals will generally know what areas to stay out of, but taxi drivers, I've found, are the best when it comes to random information about a city. They will tell you what areas to stay out of and sometimes why you want to stay out of that area. That's a really important thing to remember, because remember, when you're traveling to another place, it's a place you don't know or don't know well. So your best weapon against getting into a bad situation is understanding as much about the area you are landing in or pulling into as you possibly can. So going beyond that, so once we've gotten on a plane, and we'll talk about trains and stuff in a little bit. I do actually want to back up for just a second, and I forgot to put it in the show notes. But I think as of last year, you can now travel on Amtrak with a firearm. There was the general detractors that were saying, oh, no, it's terrible. There's going to be people shooting each other, and it's going to be like the Old West, and oh, my God. It's actually, they haven't had any incidents as far as I could find. It's a very similar process. There will be a link to it in the show notes today, and it's essentially you show up, you tell them you have a gun, you go through the same process, it goes in a lockbox, and they put it in with the rest of the luggage hold, just like when you were getting on an airplane. So,
and just throw out there, all this is for domestic travel.
Yes. International travel.
Here.
Yeah, international travel becomes much more complicated. You need to check with your embassy. You need to check with stuff like that. And one final thing that I almost forgot. You really do need to check about ammo and stuff like that when you're going, because I did notice that with TSA, there was some issue with black powder rifles. So things you need to be aware of. If you're traveling from the United States internationally, you really have to be careful about what the gun laws are there.
Oh, and knife laws. So just going back to that, international knife laws in different countries are very strict, and the punishments can be severe.
Yes. And for what here in the United States seemed like such a flippant normal issue, there than like a mountain out of a molehill. That was actually when I was helping Neil Strauss, the All-Star of Emergency. I was working with his assistant on some stuff, and she asked me to help her because she was going on a year-long trip to Europe. And one of the first when she's asking me, what should I take with me? And one of the first things I'm thinking is a knife. And then I had to back up, and I was like, well, I had to really find out where all she was going. And then I had to help her look up the knife laws in those areas. And it almost became so convoluted that I was just like, I hate to tell you this, but, you may be better off just not taking a knife with you. And, I feel like washing my own mouth out with soap for saying it, but it just became so convoluted that it was like more trouble than it was worth, especially since she wasn't really going out into the wilderness or anything like that. But these are things to be aware of, especially when you're traveling internationally. The United States has very different laws, and I was actually looking up a lot of different laws recently for another article I was working on like different South American countries and their gun laws and stuff. And oh my God, they just become so convoluted and complicated, and you can have this here, but you can't have that there. And it's all a matter of like 10 feet different. It's crazy. But anyway, know the laws. So anyway, going back to an airplane, there's a couple simple things that you can do to greatly increase your survival rate should there be an issue on an airplane. First thing is when you get on the airplane, notice where all of the exits are on the airplane. The next thing you need to do is when you sit down, count the number of seats to the exit in front of you and behind you. The reason is when an airplane catches on fire, the cabin fills with smoke incredibly fast, and it's toxic smoke. So your best bet is to get on the ground, and they have little runway lights that go down the aisle, and to crawl down that area. But you will not see the exit unless, if you haven't gotten out in time, you will not see the exit. So that with counting the seats, then you can count the seats forward or back and know where the exit is. The next thing is, don't take your shoes off, and don't do things like undo your belt and things like that. It's also really advised not to take, I know a lot of people like to take Ambien or cough syrup or things like that when they get on the plane and knock themselves out. Drinking on a plane, hey, I know I am, and I know Jonathan is too, guilty of that. But a drink or something, if you like a cocktail, fine. Just don't get hammered on a plane, because the last thing you want is some kind of issue arising on the plane and to not have your full faculties about you. Remember,
I know what you're talking about, man. I've never been hammered on an airplane. Nope, not once. Never. Nope.
I have pictures and videotape.
Whatever. I was just I was screwing around. That's all.
That's all. It was, oh, that's right. It was Jason McConnell that was hammered, not you. Not
nope,
never.
I'd never.
So anyway, don't do anything that lessens your ability to react as quickly as possible to any kind of dangerous situation that could arise on an airplane. It's not worth it. You're just not on the plane for that long. So when you get to the hotel, we've talked about water bombs and all this other stuff, but hotels, very much like airplanes, you need to know where the exits are. And at least in the United States, every hotel has plaques all over the place that show you little maps of where the exits are and where the stairwells are and all that kind of stuff.
And it's even more discreet. There are parts of Europe where you have detailed maps engraved in the desk almost. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but they take fire very seriously in a lot of Europe because older cities have usually seen great fires. So they do take it seriously, and you will find that the number of fire doors you run into in Europe is very high. Their map systems, meaning like in the back of the doors, are very, very, very detailed. So just pay attention to it. It doesn't hurt to take a look at it and read through it.
Yeah, and another thing to be aware of is while a lot of Western Europe is very safety conscious with fires and stuff, that a lot of the Eastern Bloc, and as you get into those areas, are not as safety conscious. So you need to be aware and take it upon yourself if you can't find the maps for where the exits are and stuff. Go on a field trip, figure it all out. It just takes a few minutes and kind of walk it and make sure you really understand where it all is. You are responsible for your safety in all of these situations. Another thing is tourists and stuff get preyed on a lot by criminals and stuff. And one of those ways is they'll come knock on your door. And even with less nefarious ideas than robbing you. A funny story, and I actually have known a lot of people that this has happened to in Vegas. It happens a lot less now because most of the hotels and casinos actually will block off the elevator bank in the evenings, and you have to present your room key to get to your room. But I've had a lot of friends, and I think even it happened to my dad even, where kind of like 10, 11 o'clock at night, he got a random knock on the door, opened the door, and there's a prostitute standing there. Was like, yeah, didn't you call for a prostitute? And the best was somebody was telling me this story, and they're like, yeah, and I had my CPAP mask on, and I looked like, and sounded like Darth Vader, and I'm standing there, and there's some 18-year-old girl standing there basically in a thong. Anyway, I won't go into the whole story, but it was really quite funny. But so something to keep in mind when you're in areas, if there is a random knock on the door, even if you're expecting it, look through the little peephole. Make sure you know who's on that other side of the door. And remember, it's better to be safe than worry about whether or not you're being rude. There is, unless you really know the person that's knocking on that door, there's no reason to open it. There's nothing wrong with talking to the person through the door. Be like, who are you? What do you want? And then once you're comfortable, then open the door. It's just like being at home. Don't assume just because you're in a hotel, which feels like an enclosed space, that everything is peachy, sunshine and lollipops within the confines of that hotel.
Well, and just taking that a step further, when you're outside your hotel, just if you're in an area you don't know, don't walk around as if it's your own backyard. Be aware of the situation, know what's going on. Pay attention to who's approaching you and who else might be approaching you. There are lots of parts of this country and others where criminals tend to work in teams. One person will distract you while somebody else comes up and takes your wallet, your purse, your bag, whatever it might be. So just pay attention. Being aware is one of your best defenses. And just knowing what's going on around you is critical because that keeps you out of trouble.
Before we wrap up the show, I just want everybody to know our energy level wasn't all there today, but both Jonathan and I have been incredibly busy for this last month, and it's really kind of coming to a head in this previous week here. So, but next week we'll be back with lots of energy and some really great stuff for you. And with that, we wrap up episode 40. Thank you for joining us. If you liked the podcast, make sure to leave us a review in iTunes. It helps others find us. And if you didn't, well, why not tell us about it using the contact form on the site? Seriously, the show's for you, the listener. And if you have something to say, we're listening. Be sure to connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the Urban Survival Forum through the links on the top right-hand side of the site at www.intherabbithole.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. By connecting with us, you'll receive updates about the site, notifications of new articles, and podcast episodes. That's right, we're not just a podcast. Every week, articles are posted to the site that cover all manner of topics relating to surviving in an urban environment, whether in good times or in extreme circumstances. Show notes are posted with each episode where we invite you to comment on the show, interact with us, interact with each other, and let the world know what you're thinking. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.